I'm opening today with a story you've probably already heard. It's sometimes called the story of the Good Samaritan. You can find it in the book of Luke, chapter 10, verses 29 through 37. Here's what it says. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." I make trouble frequently for things I say, mostly questions I ask. Here's an example. A dear friend of mine and I were discussing faith one day, and the subject of Christian nationalists came up. And she mentioned she thought it would be great if the country were all Christians. I asked if she thought she were a Christian nationalist, and came to find out she really didn't know the depth and horror of what that meant. So after some more discussion, she realized that her wanting the nation to be all Christians stemmed from a lack of understanding that people of all faiths and no faiths are all seeking a peaceful way of life without fear of one another and with helping one another as the norm. Here's a better example of how I stir things up. Years ago, I sat through what used to be called Adult Sunday School. It has fancier names now. And one of the lessons caused me to ask the question, what's the difference between being a really good person and being a Christian? I was answered with stares, and then someone sputtered out an answer that made no sense to me whatsoever. I figured out later that there are so many ways to be a Christian, that there's no one pat answer to my question, but I had caused a stir. Now, just to be clear, I have since thought long and hard about my question and have landed on this answer. Being Christ-like and calling yourself Christian are two different things. Christians tend to believe in the resurrection, that Jesus died so God would accept us as flawed and sinful humans into heaven. Being Christ-like does not carry that requirement. It means acting in the manner which Jesus taught. Now, one person can certainly be both, but at this point in my life, I choose to strive for being Christ-like. The word Christian has lost its meaning for me right now. Making our country great again has been a slogan for several years, and I want to amend my take on that. Our country has always had greatness and has always been flawed. I would like to take steps to move in a direction where the flaws, the racism, the ageism, the misogyny, can be lessened so that our flaws become smaller and our greatness for all people increases. To make our country great again and still, I offer a return to my first story today, the Good Samaritan story. It's so much more than someone who helped an injured traveler. Have I encountered religious leaders who walk past someone who really needs their help? You bet I have. Have I encountered someone who wouldn't help another just because they had different ethnic backgrounds? You bet. See, the Samaritans were Israelites from the same lineage as the Jews, but somehow a conflict had driven a wedge between the two groups, even though they were both from different tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel. By the time our story took place, the groups hated each other. We could probably name a few places in our world right now where the same hatred is burning. In the story that Jesus tells, the injured man is first ignored by a religious leader, then by a person of his own community, and finally, a person from a tribe who is an enemy of this injured man stops and helps. Not only in the moment, but helps into the future. It's almost like a Hatfield finding a McCoy on the road and saving his life. So the point of this story is more than just love and help your neighbor. It smacks of a huge amount of rising above, of being Christ-like, which means even if a person is your most bitter enemy, even if you no longer respect them because of an election, even if they worship a very different God from you, you are their neighbor. Show up and strive for decency in all you do. In the spiritual world, the problem is not liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, evangelicals and Unitarians. No, the problem is a lack of compassion all over. Decency is at stake. When someone's drowning in the river, do you ask if they're Republican or Catholic or gay? No. You help. Or you don't. You keep on driving. Being Christ-like is hard. One of the spiritual practices that I'm beginning to keep me grounded and whole, I hope, is to read banned books. I'm starting with To Kill a Mockingbird. I haven't read it since high school, but I just bought a copy yesterday. I was sparked to begin with this book because I came across a list of spiritual lessons that we can learn from this novel. Unfortunately, I can't give credit because it was a copy of a copy of a copy that I found. My apologies to the brain that created the list. I'm going to close today with this list and hope it inspires you to show up, to pick up your neighbor, to stick together, and to love one another. Here's the list. There are 10 short items. Stand up for what is right, no matter what, even when it's unpopular. Number 2, be kind and compassionate to all, especially those who are different from you. Number 3, don't judge others too quickly. Get to know their story. Number 4, treating everyone with respect says more about you than it does about the other person. Number 5, the world is not fair. Sometimes good people suffer, and sometimes people get away with doing wrong. Number 6, have courage to do what is needed, even though you are afraid. Number 7, fight for justice, even though the world is not fair. Number 8, be compassionate to those who make mistakes. Number 9, hold fiercely to hope, especially when all seems hopeless. Number 10, everyone has something to teach us, good or bad, learning and adapting is the only way to grow. My beloveds, when we feel ourselves in a soulless world, all we can do is to treat everyone as if they're sacred. And eventually, the sacred in them will remember. May God bless us, everyone.